Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal Podcast on this 8th of April 2020. I'm your host, Cyril Gerald-Quinn, discussing the world of sports and pop culture. Of course, tonight is a special edition of the podcast. We are looking back at really one of the great college basketball national championships of all time, the 1999 National Championship that saw UConn take out Duke 77-74. Really, again, one of the great college basketball national championships in the last 25 years. Amazingly, it's been 21 years since that game took place. Of course, there's, with the coronavirus, of course, it just destroyed the, canceled all the games, all the NCAA tournament, the entire tournament, which I know a lot of you out there missed as far as March Madness. And of course, this past Monday would have been the national championship game would have been played. So figured, let's play homage to a classic game. We are on a different platform. We are on the Zoom platform. So right now, so we try some new stuff out with Zoom. We'll see how it goes. Kind of Zoom is probably going through a little test run right now for me. So we'll see if I want to use it for future episodes. But right now we're on the Zoom platform. We're on the Zoom platform. So this will also, but with that being said, this still will be on my YouTube channel. It will be posted. I'll post it before the night is over. It'll also be on Blog Talk Radio, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes, and the same platforms that my podcast is always on towards the end. I hope everybody out there is being safe during this difficult time, and definitely a salute to all the healthcare workers and first responders, officers, fire people, doctors who are out there risking their lives to protect us and protect those who have been affected by this pandemic. Go back to 1999. This was a game where you had a Duke program that was already established as the program. Coach K had gotten the program back to its elite status. Remember, he got sick in 95. He was sick in the 94-95 season. It took him about 2.5 years to get the program back. 2.5, 3 years to get the program back to being Duke. They lost in the previous year in 98 to Kentucky, a game that they easily could have won. Had a 15-point lead in the second half and lost on the same floor, ironically, that they would lose this championship on. And this Duke team was loaded. They came into the game 37-1, 16-0 in the ACC. And if you count the ACC tournament, they went 19-0. They rolled everybody that was in their way. Led the country in scoring, 91.1 points per game. Elton Brand, of course, Player of the Year. They would have 4 of the first 14 draft picks, including 3 in the lottery. William Avery was outside of this, a pick outside of lottery. He was the 14th pick. So this Duke team had it all. You're talking about Avery, you're talking about Elton Brand, William Avery, Trajan Langdon, one of the best shooters up during that era, Corey Maggette, Nate James, Chris Carrawell, Shane Battier. I mean, a loaded Duke team. Their only loss that season prior to this game was one of those holiday tournaments in November to Cincinnati. So they came in, everybody thought this tournament was going to be the Duke Invitational. Everybody just basically crowned them. Now, they came off a tough game against Michigan State in the national semifinal, 68-62. That was a physical game. And I really felt that game had an impact on this championship. It took a look, because remember, college basketball, you play on Saturday, and that's a quick turnaround from Saturday to Monday night. You really only have 24 hours of recovery when you think about it. So that definitely, I thought definitely favored Connecticut, especially considering the fact that Connecticut took out Ohio State. Connecticut plays the early game. Duke plays the primetime game, because they will always have like the Dukes and North Carolinas of the world those blue blood teams, Kentucky, playing the late game if they got to the Final Four. So Duke always, for the most part, always when they went to the Final Four would play the second game. So they were, again, heavy favorites, 9.5-point favorites. That was the largest point favorite. They were the largest point favorite in college basketball history, in national championship history, 9.5 points, which is remarkable considering who they were facing. This Connecticut team was a team that, again, they were on that list of teams that had not great teams to never win the big one. They were at the top of that list during 1999. 95, they had one of the best teams in the country, ran to UCLA, UCLA team that would end up winning the championship. 96, they were considered to be the best team in the country, got upset in Sweet 16. Had a couple decent years in 90, had a decent year in 97. 98, they got a raw deal. That was a 32-win team, but they got put in the North Carolina bracket, the East region, which wasn't fair because Connecticut, to me, was probably, should have been, I would rank them amongst the number 2 seeds. They probably were the second best number 2 seed behind Duke that year. They should not have been in the same bracket as North Carolina and had to play in Charlotte. I mean, in Greensboro. I believe that those regionals were in Greensboro. That was not fair at all. And that was a game they lost 75-64 against a loaded North Carolina team with Antoine Jameson and Vince Carter, of course. So they come back a year later, Rip Hamilton, Khalid El-Amin, Bosco, Kevin Freeman, excellent role players. Ricky Price, the veteran point guard who had a great game against Allen Iverson. If you remember that 96 Big East championship, really locked Iverson down that second half of that game, and it completely changed the complexion of that game. If you remember that game, which was a classic Big East championship back with Ray Allen and Allen Iverson going at it. Of course, the Ray Allen shot. So Connecticut actually, believe it or not, that season was ranked 10 weeks at number 1. They were number 1 more weeks than Duke was, which I don't know if you look at it, you probably wouldn't believe it unless you were just an avid college basketball fan, or unless you were a Connecticut fan, you probably wouldn't believe that they were actually ranked number 1 more weeks than Duke. The game was a back and forth game. Duke led 39-37 at halftime. And it was early on over the course of this game that you knew that Connecticut was not going to back down. Even when Duke had the lead, Duke had an early lead. Duke had an early lead that I think Duke had like an early 7-point lead, but Connecticut battled back and it was really a nip and tuck game for the most part. Neither team ever had a double-digit lead in this game. I think the biggest lead that a team had was by 7. Was by 7. Connecticut had a lead late in the second half by 6. But this game was played in that 3 to 5 point, that 2 to 5 point radius for the most part. And this is where Jim Calhoun really, really, to me, earned his stripes as a coach. Now we already knew that he was an excellent coach up until that point, because in this game he outcoached Mike Krzyzewski from start to finish. They were going to make someone else other than Elton Brand beat him. Elton Brand, who, by the way, Elton Brand had a good game in this game. Elton Brand had 15 to 13 on 8 shots. But the reason why he only had 8 shots is they constantly came after him with double and triple teams. They took the ball out of his hands for the most part. A couple times they slipped up and let him go single coverage where he made them pay. Remember, he was 5 of 8 from the field with 15 points. But they turned him into a playmaker, into a passer. Now they would give up some threes to Langdon and some of the other players, Battier. But for the most part, they controlled Elton Brand. And Elton Brand that year was again, he was the best player in the country that year. He was player of the year. He was the guy that made Duke go. So they controlled that part. They double teamed him. I thought Calhoun used his bench. Again, this was the thing, and when I went back and watched this game, did not realize how much more quality depth Connecticut had versus Duke. Connecticut was coming off the bench with three. They were playing like 10 players. They were going 3 or 4 deep, 9, 10 deep off the bench, and that really wore Duke down. I felt like that wore Duke down in the second half. It got to a point in the second half with about 7 to 8 minutes left to where Duke was physically wearing down. And you heard Billy Packer talk about it. He was right on the money with that analysis. And that was strictly coaching. I mean, that was Calhoun using his bench, effectively using his bench. And listen, I can't knock Krzyzewski for not using his bench. The Duke team wasn't deep. I mean, they came off the bench with Nate James and Burgess. They were not deep. They were a top-heavy team. And that listen, when you have 4 pros, then your bench is not going to be that deep when you have that many pro prospects. And to his credit, he played his best players. He did not do what we saw John Calipari do in 2015 with this blue versus white team that they had, and they used 10, 12 players instead of just playing your best players, like playing Karl Anthony Towns 30 plus minutes, and which ended up costing them. And that's the reason why that team, to me, came up short in that national semifinal game in 2015 when they should have went undefeated. But Krzyzewski played his best players. This was a game where Trajan Langdon shot the lights out. Now, we knew Langdon, even during this game, we knew Langdon was not going to be. I was surprised when I looked back that Langdon was taken as a lottery pick, because Langdon was a classic guy who was undersized, perfect for college in terms of height and size, perfect for college. But you knew that wasn't going to work in the NBA. He was an undersized 2-guard in the NBA who was not a great ball handler, and that would end up catching up with him late in the game. So again, second half, Connecticut's down 39-37 at the half, but you still feel like Connecticut had been the better team. And I thought that Connecticut, but then we get to the second half, midway through the second half, Duke kind of asserts itself. They take a 5-point lead, and then, every time it seemed like Connecticut or Duke was about to kind of push away, someone from Connecticut would make a big basket or make a big play, or they would get a big turnover. So they really kept Duke from going on that patented run that they had been going on, that they had went on throughout the course of the season and had blown these teams away. Like Duke could hit you with a 15-0 run or a 20-5 run just in 2.5, 3 minutes. Connecticut was able to avoid that, and I really think that they put a lot of game pressure on Duke. Remember, Duke had the majority of Duke players were freshmen and sophomores. Avery was a sophomore. Brand was a sophomore. Getty was a freshman. Carwell was a sophomore. I think Carwell might have been a freshman. James was a sophomore. Langdon was really the only veteran that was playing. Battier was a sophomore. Langdon was really the only veteran player as a senior. Versus Connecticut, they had a bunch of juniors. They had a nice mix of juniors and seniors and a couple of sophomores. Like Hamilton was a junior. Alameen was a junior. Those guys. Bosco, I think, was a junior. So they had a nice mix. Ricky Moore was a senior. So Connecticut had a nice mix. Roshmel Jones, those guys like that were veteran players that had been in big tournament games. Remember, the previous year they made it to the Elite Eight in 1998. So they're Connecticut's role players to me. Now Hamilton was spectacular in this game. Ricky Moore in the first half really kept Connecticut in this game. He had 13 points in the first half. His defense, his tenacity, he made big shots in that first half. He really kept them in the game. Like they should have probably been down 8 to 10 points, but Ricky Moore kept them in the game. in that first half, and Rip Hamilton, second half, just takes over. Rip Hamilton had 27 points, 7 rebounds for the game, ended up winning the MOP, and made every big shot known to man in that second half. So you had more in the first half. You had Hamilton in the second half. That was the difference for Connecticut. And I really think that I don't like how Duke handled the final possessions, the last. So Duke's down 70. They're down by 1. And they're down by 1, plenty of time. And you decide to put the ball in Trajan Langdon's hand. And you have Trajan Langdon being guarded by Ricky Moore. Okay. Now, you're down by 1. You have Elton Brand, and you have a bunch of three-point guys who are capable of making three-point shots. Matt Battier, Maggette, William Avery, all those guys can make threes. Okay. Langdon. So to me, I never understood why, even watching it years later, why they decided to put the ball in Langdon's hands and have him go up against a great defensive player like Ricky Moore. So he goes up against Ricky Moore the first time. He ends up traveling. Connecticut comes down and makes both free throws. They're down 77 to 74. They get the ball to him the second time. Now, again, time, they had about 4 or 5 seconds. They had to go full court. So they really were up against it. They probably were not going to get off a good shot to begin with. But regardless of that, he loses the ball again, and they don't even get off a shot. So, but again, the last possession I don't have the major problem with, but the previous possession when you're down by 1, you're only down by 1, you can get the ball to Elton Brand. Elton Brand is either going to do one or two things. He's going to get fouled if you don't double team him, or he's going to score if you don't double team him. If you double team him or triple team him, somebody's going to be open for a wide open for a three-point shot. And that was the thing that Connecticut was willing to give up in this game, and that was some open threes. They were not going to let Elton Brand go out there and get 25 and 30. So when you double team as hard as they double team, you have to give up something. You may give up an open three for Battier. You may give up an open three for Maggette. So it's kind of like it was kind of like pick your poison from that standpoint. But I didn't like that. I didn't like that particular play call. That that play or that strategy of having Langdon go at Ricky Moore. If you remember in that game, most of Langdon's points came off catch and shoot. His stuff. Rarely did he score off the dribble in that game. And he's not an off the dribble. He's not an off the dribble player. He was a catch and shoot player. One of the great shooters during that particular era. He was a great shooter, catch and shoot player. So he did not have that type of skill like a Steph Curry who can shoot off the dribble and be lethal from 3-point range. So that was a mistake. Connecticut wins the game, and again, this game, Connecticut for the game shot 54% for the game. Duke was able to get to the line. That kept him in the game. Duke, of course, Langdon was hot from 3-point range. He made some timely threes, especially in the second half. I think he had 25 points for the game. And this win really took UConn's program to another level. No longer was Calhoun best coach not to win the championship. Connecticut having all these tournament wins without winning a championship. They were completely off that list. Remember, they had been to the Elite Eight 3 times, in 90, 95, 98, all losing to a team that either eventually won the championship or got to a championship game. UCLA losing to a team that got to the Final Four eventually. North Carolina didn't win the championship in 98, but they lost to Duke in 90. They got to a championship. UCLA in 95, they won the championship, of course, that year. So this really took the Connecticut program to another level. Calhoun out-coaching Krzyzewski. You had Connecticut would go on to win 4 championships in a 15-year span. Duke would win a championship 2 years later. Duke's team in '99 will go down probably as one of the great teams in recent memory not to win a championship. I'm not going to say they're the greatest, but one of the great teams, especially in the last 20, 25 years, not to win a championship. Probably I would say the two best teams not to win a championship in the last 20, 25 years, I would say UNLV, that 91 Vegas team, won. This Duke team two, and probably that 2015 Kentucky team. Those are probably like the three best teams not to win a championship in the last 25 years. So Duke, this game was not, Duke being a 9.5 point favorite. This was not as big of upset as you would think, considering how talented Connecticut was and how Connecticut was 33-2 coming into the game. And again, they had been number one for 10 weeks leading up to this game. They played in a tough Big East conference. This was not as big as upset as people make it out to be. Just like Duke beating UNLV was not as big as upset that people make it out to be if you really look back at that Duke team in retrospect. I mean, Christian Laettner, Grant Hill, Bobby Hurley, Thomas Hill, Brian Davis. That was a loaded Duke team. Now, at the time, nobody thought they were going to beat Vegas. It was more about what happened with them with Vegas the previous year in 1990 when they lost by 30, which is still a record in the championship game. But Connecticut was due for a championship. They were due to win. They were due to win it. And again, they would go on to become one of the top programs in the country for the better part of the next decade. They would go 4 or 5 years. They would go 5 years before they won their next championship in 2004. And again, 2001, Duke would win the championship with some of the players from this group. Battier, Shane Battier, Jason Williams led team in 2001. Again, this game was from. I encourage anybody to be a college basketball fan, especially now, with quarantine and you have some time on your hands. This was a classic game from start to finish. These two teams went at it. You like the fact that Connecticut had no fear of Duke whatsoever. Kevin Freeman was big in this game. His defense, his rebounding. He made some big plays, especially in the first half with the block shots. I mean, I think he had like 3 blocks for the game. He had 3 blocks. I think he probably had like 7 to 8 rebounds. He played a tremendous game. His numbers can't even speak for the impact that he had on this game. Khalid El-Amin made some big free throws and made a big shot down the stretch. In the second half, coming off in the second half. So I think Connecticut was just Duke had more talent up top, but as far as balance, experience, Connecticut was everything that you would want out of a national champion. They had the one great player. They had the nice number 2 piece in Khalid El-Amin, who was not afraid to taking big shots. They had the veteran point guard who could defend and also, score a little bit. And they had veteran role players. Something that's kind of lost on some of these top-heavy teams. Again, there's a reason why in recent memory that you haven't had a lot of one-and-done teams have success in the tournament, because a lack of depth and a lack of experience with seniors and juniors. So Connecticut had a nice mix of both. Great player Rip Hamilton, who ended up being a number 7 pick in the '99 draft, and a bunch of veterans that they had been there before in losing in Elite 8 in '98. So of course, again, I mentioned earlier, Duke would end up going on to having 4 of their first 14 draft picks in the '99 draft. Hamilton was the only one that was drafted from that Connecticut team in the following draft as the 7th pick in '99. El-Amin had a cup of coffee in the NBA, but didn't play long. And none of those other guys really materialized on this team to being NBA players. Again, this is one of the great college national championship games in the last 20, 25 years. I definitely would go encourage, go watch it if you have some time on your hands. Connecticut 77, Duke 74. This is the Real Deal Podcast. I will see you next time.